Hi, hello, and welcome to the Plant 3D User Community Meetup for February. My name is Jason Drew, and co-presenting today with me is Joel Harris.
Hey,
So,
everybody.
hello, we'll go ahead and get started here. So just going through some general housekeeping topics here with the GoToWebinar. Try to keep your mic muted if possible, just to avoid any kind of background noise. We do have some time here where we will do some live Q&A and we can unmute you. And if you raise your hand, if you have a question, we can do that through the session. If you have any questions, just general text, you can type those into the Q&A box as we go along, and then we'll come back and look at those as we go through. This session is being recorded, so if you have any restrictions against that, please disconnect now. The session will be available at the customer success site after we get it recorded and packaged up there. So my name is Jason Drew. My title is Designated Support Specialist here with Autodesk. I basically provide technical support to enterprise customers, also work in the Autodesk communities and with some of the products listed here. I have a background of 10 years in IT support before joining Autodesk and that industry. Spent 3 years as a P&ID designer for oil and gas and other types of industrial facilities with Smart Plant P&ID. I've been with Autodesk for 8 years now as in product support in general. So I'll turn it over to Joel to do an intro, and he's got fighting a little bit of a cold, so
Hi, everybody. Apologize for the rough voice here. I see a lot of familiar names in the attendees. It's good to see some of you folks returning. We're doing our best to put together some really good content here for you. My name is Joel Harris. I'm a designated support specialist, just like Jason. We've been working together here at Autodesk for 6 years. Before that, I come from industry, primarily oil, gas, and chemical, as a piping designer, design lead, software administrator, and such. Anyways, just get right into it. Thanks everybody for showing up. I'll be here monitoring the questions in the Q&A session there. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer those while Jason's doing his presentation.
All right, thank you, Joel. So for the agenda today, we're going to have an overview. This is what we're going through now. Plant 3D news, general updates and news. We try to do this each session just to kind of give you a briefing of what's going on with Plant 3D. This month's theme is pretty interesting. It's around data integrity for Plant 3D projects. So we're basically talking about, how can you avoid these type of situations where you have data loss? How do you fix them and what causes them? So that's the main thing we'll be going through today. We'll have follow-up questions from last month, and then we'll have some open discussion at the end, so you can ask anything that you'd like, either live or through the Q&A chat box. So the reason why it's, for those of you that haven't attended before, the reason why we're putting these sessions together is to give a routine engagement with the global plant community. So we want to bring together or put some time on the calendar to bring everyone together to go through and not only provide an update on the product, but try to present some tips and tricks and workflows each month to hopefully help you gain some more understanding and knowledge of Plant 3D and with that tool set. So each of these sessions is a casual engagement. We'll have this small portion, like we mentioned, with news, and then we'll have the general discussion at the end. So we'll try to leave at least 30 minutes towards the end just for the discussion, and then 30 minutes for the main session. So 1 hour in total is what these are set for. I do have to put this up here. I'm not going to read this whole slide, but this is our safe harbor statement, just meaning we may be talking about futures or enhancements, things like that coming in the product down the road. And of course, Autodesk being a publicly traded company, we can't share any dates. So just keep that in mind, that anything we share here that's future forward looking, don't base any business decisions off of that. Make sure that you keep that in mind if we're talking about something that's new, because dates are always subject to change. And so are development schedules. So on to Plant 3D news. We still want to mention that the beta, the Plant 3D 2021 Rogue beta, is still open through the AutoCAD Customer Council. So that's going to be available. The serial number and key that's out there will go till March 18th. So if you'd like to join that, there's still some time. You can email the group here, the plant3d.beta.team@autodesk.com, and they will add you into that beta. You'll get an invite. And any links that you see in here today are going to be included in the PDF file that we publish out there on the Plant Community resource store. So don't worry about grabbing these if you don't get those immediately off the screen there. We'll have them at the end. The plant development team is looking for feedback from customers on this beta, basically how you're putting your projects into Docs. Now that's going to be the new platform. I want to mention that as well. We are moving from BIM 360 teams, our team, over to Docs. So basically what we're looking for is how are you backing up your current projects? Are you just running a standard project backup, and then sharing it to Docs, and any feedback you have or any issues you may have ran into there? And you can do all that through the beta forum itself. The product team is active in there, and they will see your posts.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm still seeing the title slide there, and I
Oh,
think everybody else is too, so we may have to kind of refresh that. There we go.
Let's see if that's okay. Sorry.
Now we're
Apologies.
seeing.
Got to hit that button.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, let's get back over here to where we were at. So yeah, getting into the overview here, safe harbor. I want to put that up there for sure for just a second and hold on that one. Like I said, I won't read all this. And then going into the news here, this is what I was talking about on the beta, closed on March 18th, and then the email here for the team if you want to reach out and join that. And like I said, the feedback that they're asking for through the forums. Now, Plant 3D with the experts, we have a YouTube playlist we're putting together. So you can go out to this link, and as we're adding these, trying to do them probably 1 or 2 a month, just on various topics, and we have those listed out throughout the year. So we'll be adding those. I recommend that you go in there and you can subscribe to that playlist. It'll tell you when we post a new one, and we're trying to hit as many topics as we can this year. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And then moving on to the webinars themselves, these meetups, we have these across 3 geographic regions. So we run the ones for Americas, Asia Pacific, and then the European time zone. So this link here will take you in to sign up for any of those sessions, and you can forward those along to your colleagues if you want to invite somebody in a different time zone there. And then I wanted to mention that there was a session at Autodesk University last year that was done around the future, past, present, future of Plant 3D with the product owner, Misha Belovoski. So you can go out there and watch that recording on the community meetup resource site. And that was broadcast live with the webcam there in the room. So it's a pretty cool session. So I recommend checking that out. And then the Autodesk Group Network, this site has been updated fairly recently. There's some sections in there where you can look for Plant 3D groups, not just Plant 3D, but you can find Augie groups and things like that in your area. We do have the Plant 3D community meetup listed there, and then we also have, there's a LinkedIn group for Plant 3D that you can find the hyperlink there and then join those just to kind of get involved with the community. So on to the main topic here. Project data integrity is something that we often see through product support. Sometimes you have a drawing that gets corrupted, or there's an issue with the drawing, and so you have to reach out to support or try to figure out how to recover that. And so we want to go through what we've experienced with our testing, what we've seen through product support, various issues, and how we've recovered from those, and then ways to avoid those situations. So it is a complex topic. We probably can't cover everything today, but we wanted to touch on the main points so that you have an understanding of what to do if you experience this type of issue, and then how to recover from that and keep going with your project. So we want to kind of talk about what types of issues can occur, what causes those issues, how do you avoid those issues, and then how do you recover from that and restore data if you do run into one of those problems. So one thing we usually see, or the 3 main things we usually see with this, is around either drawing files, project database records, things that are actually in the database, and then you've got project files themselves. So with drawing files, often we'll see what's considered like missing data, missing Plant 3D object properties, where the actual drawing has the information in it, but it's not in the database. Sometimes you have a drawing that just won't open. It's actually the drawing itself is corrupted. You can have a situation where you're missing geometry. So for example, you load a plant model into Navisworks and you're not seeing elbows, or you're not seeing certain objects in there, then it's really not in the drawing file. So that can happen sometimes. With project databases, sometimes we'll see where the drawing is out of sync, or the database is out of sync with the drawing, and those need to be merged up together. So there's some warning message that'll come up for that. And then around actual object tags, there can be a problem there too, where you can't assign a tag. Basically, there's a registry table in the database of all the tags that have been assigned, and if that's already in use, but maybe your drawing didn't save that properly, and you come back in, it says, oh, sorry, that tag's already used. There's a way to clear that out and restore that to where you can start using those tag numbers again. And then with project files, usually the problems we see with that can be around the XML files that point the project to where the configuration files are located. We've seen a rare instance where if the network goes down as you're opening a project, it can cause an issue with those XMLs and you have to go get those from a backup. So we'll talk about backups here in a little bit, but that's some of the best way to get that restored back. So this is what it looks like if you run into what we call the missing properties issue. So let's say I'm working in a drawing and I click the save button. It's basically saving, committing the changes into a drawing file. It's also trying to save those to SQL Server. So if for some reason the connection to SQL Server goes down, it does save it into the drawing. But when I come back in here, it's not reading it because the record's not there. So you'll see something like this. You'll see it's pipe. It knows what entity it is. It just doesn't have any of the Plant 3D specific properties. So if you see that, you know something's happened with your drawing there.
And should mention here that this is a totally different problem than if you see the word 3D solid in that box instead of pipe. So
yeah.
Here it's still plant objects without data. And if it says 3D solid, it's been converted into an AutoCAD entity.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if somebody does an export to AutoCAD and then you try to copy that into a project, you'll see it here, but it'll just be, like you said, a 3D entity, not really a plant object. Yep, good point there. And then how to fix these. So a lot of times with the missing properties, the best thing to do is to remove the drawing from the project and then copy a good backup back in there. That's going to bring all the data back in, because really all of the metadata that would be stored in the drawing or the project database is stored in the drawing. There's what they call a blob or a binary large object in there. So all that's in there. That's what really makes Plant 3D drawings portable across projects. So that's an option. You know, detecting, you know, if something's broken in there, how do you know if something's wrong? Well, there's some options you can use. There's a command called plant audit that will check for those broken parts in there, or those corrupted parts, and actually take those out. And then a lot of times you can use something like AutoCAD compare to see if there's something's changed. Because if you go through, you know there's an issue somewhere and you run plant audit, you may not know what it's deleted. So I can kind of show an example of that here if I bring this up. So this is a plant model. Let's say I've just ran the plant audit command. It's going to go through and it's going to start to clean up some stuff in here. Now I don't really know what it did. I need to know. So, but let's say I have a copy of this drawing that I know is good, and I'm going to compare against the one that I just cleaned up here. What you can do, there's a compare command, and I think this came in with maybe it's 2019. So if you go to compare, under the collaborate, in fact in plant it's under collaborate, and then you use DWG compare, this is going to let me take two drawings and compare the two. And I will just grab this one and let it run. And it's looking for any changes that have been detected. So let's say something was erased or something was added, it's going to show me that in here. It's also going to do some redlining for me to show me where those are at, which I think is probably the coolest part here. So I've unloaded these XREFs, so it's showing me that, hey, that XREF is gone out of there. But what it's going to do, and let me just branch this down here a little bit. It's going to show anything that's not in the current drawing is red, anything that's been added is green, and then the revision clouds are going to be with this this yellow indication here, and it's going to circle those. Now this one I don't really have anything that's broken or changed in it, but what it would do, well, it did highlight what there's a valve that's been changed, actually missing. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, that was the main thing there that it took out, maybe an elbow right here. So you can visually see this. It's much easier than trying to go through the entire model and find this on your own. And then what I can do from this, I can actually export this out to a file, an actual DWG file. It'll save a snapshot of this drawing. So basically it's going to retain the changes that are here into a new file, and you could pull that into DWG Truvy or something like that if somebody didn't have Plant 3D. So it's a really handy method to use there, so that you know what's changed and what's been modified. So just wanted to kind of demo that real quick.
Hey Jason, are you going to talk a little bit about the plant audit command and some of the things it does? Because I've got some share there if you wanted.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, you can talk about that.
I did have an issue with a customer that we found a problem with the plant audit command not quite getting as deep as it needed to with pipe. Some of the things with pipe specifically, if you look at the pipe properties, I don't know if you can bring up one there, Jason, just a piece of pipe in your model in Plant 3D and just look at the properties on it. It's got its position as a pipe start point. So you have the X and Y of the port 1 there are shown. You've got center gravities calculated. You're going to have length and cut lengths related to the actual pipe length in the model and its overall weight. So those are all actually calculations that could get out of sync between the model and the database. And so one of the things that came out in 2019.2, 2020.1 updates was some corrections in the way plant audit goes through it and thoroughly recalculates this stuff. So it's not just a simple finding a database and reconnecting it up. It is also going through and doing some recalculations on these based on the current state of the model. So I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we ran into in the past and notified the development team and just said, hey, is there anything you can do to try to get this to sync back up? And that's kind of what they did with that change. And there have been plenty of data integrity fixes over the years with line number tags and things like that as they come up. Even some things with P&ID specifically. All of those come out, in hot fixes and updates. So definitely worth keeping up with the latest version if you can. So as far as a corrupted drawing that won't open, sometimes you run into that. Usually what you want to try to do is get the latest backup if you can. You usually have the autosave on your local drive, which is going to be probably the latest version versus what's backed up by the IT group from possibly a day before. And basically, if you want to go through and pull that drawing back in, a lot of times you can use this procedure here. There's a special command, PNP drawing database blob merge, it's one of the longest commands in there. Set that to 0, allow you to open the drawing, and then you're going to basically save that, and then you're going to set it back to 1 because you always want that to be on 1, but when it's off, it's basically telling it, okay, try to pull in what's in that drawing and get it into the actual memory and the cache and the database there, and then you save it back. So and one thing you can basically do once you get it open in there, this is basically trying to get it open. There is some times where you have to just reroute that pipe. So you may want to use like a Navisource coordination model as well. If you want to bring it in, just see where everything was, line that back up, and then repipe over. You can kind of see what's missing and get that back in there because sometimes this doesn't work. It's not a fail-safe thing.
And so my understanding of this, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you set that to 0, the software doesn't try to take what's in the drawing as far as its database and merge it with the SQL database. It basically lets the SQL database take precedence as far as data goes, assuming that your drawing database got corrupted somehow and that it's no longer good. So when you set this to 0, it says to the software, just use what's in SQL, connect it up with the components that are in this drawing. Don't try to take my corrupted blob database that's in the drawing and use that at all. But you do need to set that back to 1 to get that blob database synced back up afterwards.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's some situations, like I said, where this doesn't work, but it has fixed some PNIDs before and some 3D models. So just wanted to mention that that's a possible workaround to try there. So one thing that can also happen is you can have missing geometry. So the data is still there in Data Manager, but you can't see it on the screen. Or like I mentioned before, you take it in Navisworks and it's showing up in wireframe or not at all. So recently what we found, there's a option or a variable consolidation mode. You set that to 0 into a regen 3, and it may pop that back in. It's more of a graphics cache type of thing. I believe that might be fixed in the latest version. But some of those identified at least back in 2018, 19. So if it's still missing, basically, one thing you can do, if you hover the crosshairs over a pipe section of pipe or a fitting or anything like that, you'll see the little disconnection symbol and what that's associated with. So sometimes you have to go through and kind of inspect those and reroute the pipe. One thing that one of the specialists here found is that if you need to recover and sort of refresh what's in the actual pipe run itself, you can set a temporary version of the spec. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm taking the current spec that belongs to, just give it a different name, copy that into the project. And what you're doing is you're flipping the spec over to that temporary one and then back, so that because you want to bring it back to the original spec, and that forces plant to kind of cycle through all of the pipe ports and connections and try to bring that stuff back in, put all the fasteners back in, and it works pretty well. And sometimes you have to do something like that to sort of refresh it and get it back in there. And then at that point, you can save the drawing and then take out that temporary spec if you don't need it. But that's one good method we've heard about for recovering when you've got some pipe that's not there or some things that are missing. And a lot of times, if you open a project or open a project drawing, you'll get a message like this. If you've copied it in from another project, it's saying it's not in sync. That's, for example, if you were to take a drawing for another project and overwrite one that's in your current project, it pops up and says, hey, this drawing doesn't match the current database data. What do you want to do? Really, your only option is to merge that, update the project data to match the drawing, which is usually what you want. The other option, if you want to kind of back out but still look at the drawing, is the second one there. Do not update the project data, just open it as read only. So this gives you an opportunity to go ahead and sync up that drawing and get it into the database so that it matches everything. Everything in the project matches the drawing and the database there in the records. Now, one thing you might run into is the registered tags problem. This can happen if you're working maybe in like P&ID and you've tagged something in the drawing, you save it, but it doesn't. Well, I'm sorry, the other way around. You go ahead and tag a valve. Let's say, for example, it writes that into SQL, but then your drawing gets lost, doesn't save. Something happens on the file server, right? So the project thinks it's in use, but it's actually not in use in any drawing. So you can't use that tag anymore. So usually what you want to do there is, ask everyone to sign out of the project so you can run a full audit. It should purge that out in some extreme situations where it doesn't find that. We've seen that a few times before. You can go into the whichever database it is, if it's P&ID or the piping database, and go into the PNP tag registry table and look for that record row. You'll see that tag number and you can delete that row. That'll free it up, so when you come back in, you can use that tag again. And there is an article here on that. I've linked to that, so it's a knowledge base article we've written up on that process, and it does involve editing databases. So just want to use some caution there. Maybe work with your SQL administrator so they can go in and find that table and safely do that. Obviously, run a backup first in case something gets deleted inadvertently, but this does work, and it's something that we've seen solve the tagging issue before. And then going into some of the causes, so what's some of the root causes for these issues we've seen, with hardware, for example, if you've got a SQLite project on your local machine, you may have a hard disk going out or bad sectors, things like that. Memory issues can cause crashes or corruption. And then with software, in rare occasions we've seen third-party add-ons and tools that are made for AutoCAD but not specifically for Plant 3D. You kind of mess with those native plant objects and cause some corruption with those. And then old project templates, we've seen problems with those too. Maybe it's an old civil file or one that came from CADWorks that's being moved around and used as a template in Plant 3D. That can have some stuff in there that really interferes with operations or just kind of clutters up the drawing. So even purging doesn't really fix that. We recommend that you use the out-of-the-box templates that come with Plant 3D. Those are just standard AutoCAD 3D DWT files, and just use those to create your new project drawings themselves. And watch for that too, even with like ISO drawings and things like that, because those can cause issues there too. And then lastly here, network infrastructure is really important. Network switches and routers are rarely redundant because you just have one connection. So if one of those goes down in the middle of the day, sometimes you can't avoid that, and you're going to see a warning message pop up. And when you do see that, make sure you kind of stop what you're doing, back out, and then wait till you know that it's good, and then go back into Plant 3D to reestablish your connection there with SQL Server. Because anytime you have a failure of trying to save to the drawing file or SQL Server, that's where you see problems on one side or the other. So always good to have a solid network connection there.
I'll mention here that a really good diagnostic tool is Wireshark out there. If you use it for this sort of, if you suspect issues with your SQL Server, one of the things that you can do in Wireshark is check to see if the traffic, the time it takes to ping the server or send data to the server is the same as receiving back data from the server. If there's a delay difference there, sometimes you'll have a latency that's in the server itself, as well as you can check to see what types of packet errors you're getting to the server communication. So just put a note in there about Wireshark is a good way to diagnose that.
Yeah, I think in all the testing we've done, latency really isn't a problem. A plant will sit there and wait as long as it can. Of course, SQL Server can time out and things like that, but it's pretty good about low, I guess you'd say low latency or high latency, low speed connections. It'll sit there forever and try to write. But anytime you have a disconnect, that's where it has problems, where it loses the connection, or that that port goes down or something like that. That's where you start to see problems typically. So this is just a brief diagram here that kind of shows the process of opening up drawings. This is kind of technical side of things. And just to kind of mention, what this is part of an article that we're trying to get published into the Artist Knowledge Network. So we'll get that link out when that's ready. But this is just a screen capture of it. What it's doing, you're open a drawing. It's checking your connection to SQL Server. If you're connected, it's going to go on and say, okay. If it doesn't have a connection to SQL, you're going to get a message saying, hey, this project can't be opened. And then as you go through, it's going to check and see if the drawing was saved properly. If it wasn't, it'll prompt you. It'll give you that synchronization warning. And then if you click yes to go ahead and update, it's going to update the SQL Server and the blob data in the drawing. And then that's going to update your local cache. And then it's going to go on and open the drawing successfully. And then if not, there's still a problem. There could be an error message at the end. So it's going through this whole process. It's kind of good to understand what's going on in the background so that when you try to troubleshoot this stuff, you know where to go look. So this is kind of an overview of what happens there. And then when you go to save a drawing, this is where the connection to the server is important. If you're connected to SQL, everything goes smoothly. It's going to check the SQL Server for updates. It's going to update your local data cache. Now this is all happening when you click the save button immediately. And as it's updating SQL, it's updating the drawing itself, so that gets saved. And if there's a problem, basically it's going to back out, and it's going to have it'll update the drawing blob from memory, but it's not going to make that into SQL Server. So a couple of things happen there as you go through, and it tries its best to save the data either locally or on the SQL Server. So as long as you get it in the drawing, you're usually okay, and you can kind of recover from that.
Hey Jason, we have a question in the Q&A about how does that drawing open save process change with cloud collaboration? And we should just talk about the local cache.
Yeah, it's a little bit different there. And same thing would be for like a Vault environment where as you're working, you're checking out these drawings and you're really working on like a local SQLite project. So if you save the drawing, it's writing to that local collaboration cache folder. The DWG file is stored there. The SQLite file is stored there as well. So it's really saving that. And then it's also trying to commit that stuff up to the cloud. And I think we've got a slide here coming up. It's going to show what you're going to see if there's an actual disconnection with cloud collaboration, because it is a little bit different because you're connecting to that server that's outside the environment there. So basically, if you're going through and you do have a problem connecting to SQL, let's say you're routing pipe and all of a sudden the server goes down or the switch goes down, and you click the plus sign to go ahead and route, continue route grip, it's gonna keep giving you this warning saying, oh, sorry, I can't write into the database to create this record that you're trying to put in, because it is doing that live as you go, because it's tagging those objects and it's basically reserving those tags in the database. So you'll see this pop up. If you do, this is a good warning sign to go ahead and stop and back out, close out of your, obviously, hopefully you saved recently, back out of the project, check with your IT group, say a SQL Server down, something like that. And then you can go back and launch Plant again, because each time you open the Plant project, that establishes the SQL Server connection. So if you lose that as you're going along, that's where you can get into some of the lost properties type of thing. And really the newer versions of Plant, 2018, 2019, 2020, this pops up immediately when you try to route and there's no SQL connection. The older versions, I think you could actually keep piping. I've done that before where I pulled the plug on SQL Server, I've routed a bunch of pipes, saved it, come back in, and the pipe that I've routed since SQL went down is showing no properties. But we're getting better about these error messages to try to avoid getting into that situation where it's not actually allowing you to, or it's allowing you to actually save those without the right metadata in there. So just want to point that out. And then also, like was asked about here with the cloud services. So if you're working on a project that's cloud collaboration, it's it's working locally, but if the connection does go down for some reason, maybe it's your connection to the actual services or the services go down on the web hosting side, this is what you're going to see. It's basically similar to the other one where it's saying, hey, I can't write to SQL. It's going to give you this error. Now you can keep working because you're working in a local cache like that. And then when the services come back up, you do a refresh from project, it should push all that in there and go back to normal. So this one is a little bit different. I mean, you don't have much control over the connection to the cloud services, but this will pop up if you get a situation like that. And then, one thing I want to mention is about SQLite. So SQLite is basically the out-of-the-box type of setup. If you just go in and install Plant 3D and create a new project locally, it's just using that file. It's a file-based database. And we have seen some customers trying to use this on SQLite project on a network with multiple users. Well, uh, basically the SQLite documentation recommends against that because it's just not really good for file locking and things like that with the way that it works. Sometimes it's okay with one user or two users, but there's a lot of situations there where you can have some conflicts there as you're trying to save. So I always recommend that you use SQL Server for multi-user projects. We've seen a lot of just odd kind of corruption type of things when using SQLite over a network, and so it's just something to keep in mind if you're planning out a implementation or something like that. And then how to avoid these issues. One thing we recommend is auditing projects on a regular basis. If it's an active project, multiple people working on it, probably once a week is good. If you can do that at the end of the week, you do that through the local data cache purger, which the path is listed there. And basically you can just go find that and put a shortcut to it on your desktop. You could have that run and purge the cache, on a regular basis as well. And really what you want to do is you want to go ahead and audit that project. And then if you want to clear your local cache afterwards, that's just kind of general housekeeping for plant projects. It never clears out that local cache that it's generating as you're working. So you may have that cache get what we call stale or out of date. So it's always good to just flush that out every once in a while. And then on the SQL side of things, you can actually go in and all the way down to like re-indexing the database tables. But in general, shrinking the databases is good to do every once in a while because it doesn't do that automatically. If you have a really large project, those files for the SQL databases can get pretty large. And so if you do that, maybe once a week or once a month, that will clear it and keep the disk usage down by quite a bit. Of course, maintaining regular backups of the drawing files in SQL Server, nightly if you can, is always good. So you have those to fall back on. And then as mentioned before, latest versions, latest updates, hot fixes, if you can stay on the latest version, we're always putting out, if there's any kind of data integrity fix, that's going to be in usually the latest version. So if you get the latest version, you're going to have that available. I also want to mention Wi-Fi connections. So a lot of companies have Wi-Fi connections and laptops, and we've seen situations where somebody opens up a plant project, opens a drawing, they get up and walk across the building to go to a meeting or something, and they lose their Wi-Fi connection. So you start to see those errors pop up on screen as you're trying to work on that. So make sure that you close and save out before you change your Wi-Fi connection or switch over. May or may not just immediately switch over automatically. The other thing we've seen,
sorry, Jason, the classic one there is when you're on hard connection in a docking station or something with your laptop, and then you take it out of the docking station and you connect the Wi-Fi. When it's switching between those two, you've basically broken the connection to the SQL server. So sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that's a good point. I've done that before myself. And then laptops, of course, close the lid and put it into sleep mode. Even a desktop can do this. You want to be kind of careful with that because it will typically power down either the Wi-Fi and or the Ethernet, so it loses that connection. And when you open the lid, it comes back up, it doesn't have the connection there anymore. So just something to be aware of. Maybe save and close out before you at the end of the day, or if you're picking up your laptop and walking off somewhere, just always be aware of that. Then going into, get back over here. So recovering from these issues, restoring from backup, like we said, plant audit is something that we've mentioned before. That's good to use there. Now there is a new command that's coming out, or actually has already been released for collaboration projects. As in the past, it was always difficult to audit those databases in the cloud because it's always going to audit like the local cache. So that's changed a little bit. There's a new command. There's I don't remember the exact command line what it is, but there's going to be an option in 2021 where you just right click on the project name and then you can tell it to back up the or not back up to audit the cloud project. So that's coming in newer versions, and so that's going to be available. It is in 2020 for sure, and then 2021. And then also, as Joel mentioned, 2019.2 and 2020, the plant audit command has been expanded a bit so it can try to sort of fix those corrupted entities and geometries and bring that data back in from the database. So that's one improvement that's recent there. So let's see. Any questions before we go on to the last sections here? I just want to see if there's anything in the chat window or if anybody has anything live. Maybe, somebody's experienced an issue like this and you've seen some best practices. We can, unmute and let you ask live or talk live through the session here. And I guess, Joel, just let me know if you see somebody put their hand up there. And then just want to briefly go into Q&A follow-up from last session. So there was a question about, does Autodesk have any plans for additional function or adding additional functionality to Plant 3D to better support mining, minerals processing, or bulk material handling industry? So we did some internal searching. We really didn't find anything on this particular industry or topic that was being developed. We did see there is a wastewater group that meets, I believe they met at AU last year and they meet on a regular basis, but that's for that particular industry. So we didn't see anything that was coming out around like new equipment modeling features and things like that. I would say that in general for, working with that type of industry, that type of material handling with conveyors and crushers and things of that such, that, factory design utilities has always been out there. Inventor is really good for bringing that type of stuff in. It's always good to try to simplify that down if you can. A lot of that stuff is very detailed, so you want to get a more simplified version if you can. But yeah, in general, we don't have anything specifically coming out around that industry. So we'll definitely put that in as feedback for the future. Did you have something?
Yeah, we have a question asking about the autosave command. The question is, when we first started with Plant 3D, we were told not to use the autosave command because of conflicts with writing to SQL database. Is that not an issue?
I haven't seen anything reported around it. The autosaves is actually, well, there's two things, the autosave and then there's a save percentage, right? So there's that, it gets pretty complex around that topic. So we'll see if we can find some information on that. I think it's okay to use it. I mean, I've used it over the years and I've been able to go back and grab an autosave and copy it into the project, and it has the data there. And I've never really seen any kind of SQL issues reported with it myself.
Okay, great. And we had one other question. Somebody asked for information about the wastewater industry group, so we can send them that offline.
Yeah, I think we can get connected there with them.
And just on the audit and plant audit commands and project audit, I know that the development team has been trying to streamline those processes because of the work that's been being done around collaboration tools, in the cloud and with Vault and such. So look for in the future some additional improvements, and this is kind of under that safe harbor statement, is that we don't know exactly what we can talk about as far as what's coming down the pike, but I know that there's been a lot of work around that to bring more stability and management tools to the auditing with Plant 3D. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Let's see. Another question
we have several questions have come in here. Go ahead. Is there a water and wastewater industries group?
Yeah, that's the one that we found mentioned internally, and I know it's a public group that meets on a regular basis. So we'll gather up the information. For those of you that are interested, just pop your name in there in the Q&A window. We'll send you information about that group and how you can join.
Good. Looks like we have several people that are interested in that. So thank you. Just add your name to the list in the Q&A by asking for the information on that. We'll get that to you. We have a question here that says, I actually had a similar issue with our office in South Africa. They regularly lose power and the server goes down. The reports didn't want to open and a few other problems. I did run an audit on the project and it fixed the problem. I was very happy about that. Just some positive feedback. Well, it's always nice to hear positive feedback. Jason and I both being in support, we'll just take that home with us tonight. So thank you very much for that. But yeah, it's definitely it's something that nobody's immune to, being having to do that sort of thing and avoid damage to your project data. It's basically almost disaster recovery plan in some sense, and business continuation too. So Plant 3D is different than AutoCAD in that it does require that connection to that SQL database, and you have to understand that even though it is an AutoCAD tool set, it has some extra requirements like that. So.
A question here about the autosave is the best location for that, the C drive. Seen issues saving through the company intranet network folder where it becomes corrupt. Yeah, I think you want to have like a very fast, like if you can go to a local disk or an SSD drive, something like that. That's probably the best place for it if you have the ability to change that. That way it's saved local and you can get to it easily. Because if that gets corrupted somewhere, if a network switch goes down and you don't have your autosave, then you're kind of stuck because you can't write to either of them there. So usually the C drive is going to be your best bet. I also want to mention on the audit command in general, with AutoCAD PNID drawings, if you have a problem with one of those where any type of corruption with a PNID drawing, if you do the standard AutoCAD audit command, there's not a plant audit for those drawings, right? So the regular audit command, we've been told by the development team that does a little bit more with a PNID drawing. And I've actually seen that fix some issues before with tags and just objects in general. So, but it's not really specifically documented. It's just something to keep in mind if you have an issue with a PNID drawing in a plant project itself. Let's see here. Some more names for the wastewater group. Okay, we'll definitely get those, get you guys in contact there with that group. See if there's any other technical questions. If not, well, it looks like we're right at the 35-minute mark here. So we'll go ahead and close out. I'll stay on here for a few minutes if you got any questions. If not, we thank you for joining today. You'll get a survey after this session. If you go ahead and take that and give us your feedback. Look forward to hearing those and also talking next month at the next topic that we have coming up.
Thank you, everybody.